All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live. I apologize for the delay. For those that will be listening later, it's kind of part two, or part one rather, of series of lives discussing some of these tribes and who they actually are. Um, the main thing we're trying to get away from is greetings, Brother Copper Indio. Greetings, Brother Marcus Pauling. Just started to break down some of these tribes and who they were and who they are. Because I hear a lot of people saying we all the time. We. And we is actually, it's too inclusive, but we'll understand about some of these tribes that it's actually exclusive in helping people to find out who they actually are. Greetings, Brother Kerry Bate, who they actually are. So, a lot of people will say, it doesn't matter, but then it does matter if you are trying to discover who you are and get to the essence of who you are and dealing with your family members, your loved ones, your clan, and your tribe. It's imperative that we find out where we belong. So I wanted to start with the Natchez. I know that's Brother No Sellouts. That's his tribe and his people. But I wanted to go there because it really goes into depth on who they are, and I probably won't have enough time to cover everything. Greetings, Brother No Sellout. I was just talking about it. See how he popped up. That people will say certain things, and in certain areas, and I'm one of those too. That for me, I would just say I don't know something. If I don't know something, then I will tell you, hey, I don't know. Let's go and discover and find out on our own. But it gets back to greetings, Brother Marlon, the mixologist. It gets back to discovering who you are, and that's why I kind of this series will be, do you know what time it is? Because I keep hearing those that are saying certain things, but if it's not in the right time frame, then it doesn't make sense. If you say, okay, we're going to eat at 12, well, if they don't know what time it is, people will show up at 12 midnight instead of 12 noon. So, and he said, well, nobody was here. It's the middle of the night. I don't understand why I'm eating. They told me 12, but they didn't tell me whether it was noon or whether it was midnight. So knowing what time it is and putting things in perspective. And we'll start with some of the earlier, I guess, Europeans that came over, and then perhaps even work our way backwards. So I'm gonna give you some names, and I'm gonna give you some references, so you can actually do, some research for yourselves, because it's, like I say, it is vital that once you start knowing who you are, you walk a little bit taller, you'll walk in confidence, and when suck MCs try to come to you and tell you that this is who you are, and you can speak definitively, this is who I am, and you can't tell me who I am. And I say that's when the ad hominems will start and trying to discredit you and attack your character. But as long as you know who you are, the rest of it doesn't even matter. So I'm gonna start, like I said, and I'll give you, like I say, a few references here. One of the, and I'll put the name in there as well. This one is just the Natchez Indians by George Savo III. and I'm going to put that name in that the name of this book. And I mean, these are things, like I say, when you're online, it's real easy to grab. And then I'll give you certain references as well when you interact with the people. Um, and again, it's what happened with it with every tribe. You'll find it in some books, but the majority of you'll find dealing with oral tradition. And then you also go back and check your culture. If you find out why people in your family, the elders in your family, do certain things, and what I've come to find, a lot of times we don't even ask like why we do certain things. We just do it because somebody else has always done it, and not even really breaking it down. But George Sabo starts talking about uh, these Natchez, and when you get to the title page of the book, you'll see that certain things, and like I say, I don't ever jump on anybody's religion, and you'll hear me reference the collections of books that you call the Bible. But I know most of you that are here listening have done your own research, and you'll come to find out. Well, I always say that the collection of books is a remix of a remake of a remake of a remake, and you'll find these things in all of these cultures that never had supposedly never had any interaction with each other, according to Europeans. But why are they telling the same story? But on that title page, you will see when the Natchez are actually doing a ceremony, you will find that there is two rings of people that are around, and then there is the Kaseke, or the high chief, that is in the middle. And the best way I can explain it, like I said, because the majority of us did grow up some form of fashion in the church. Um, greetings, and you'll find out that it's where they talk about the tabernacle, and they talk about the temple, and they say, you have the outer court, the inner court, and then the holies of holies, or the most holy place. And this is the symbol that you will see here, and this gets to why and how the Natchez actually built their fortified places. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a reference of Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, and where he says they came before Columbus, and he had his other writings in there, and they actually had it. I don't know if they still have it because on display and it's been a while, and I have to I have to go through, because that was back in the day when I had the digital camera, so I have to dig into my files. And the Smithsonian, that he shows a display of how a fortified city was shown in that area among the what we call the Mississippians, the Mississippi Maya. And we'll break down in who they are, and actual names, and how, again, certain vowels that change and depend on the accent of certain syllables that you may think is different things, but it's not. And you'll find out that these are actually dealing with the same people. So it where he comes in and he starts talking about George Sabo, starts talking about those that were the sons of the sun, and trying to prove that this chief that he came across was actually the son of the sun. And this was where they talk about, the historians talk about, in 1541. Remember, this is early, because we're talking about 1492, but this is 1541, because as we recall, Christopher Columbus never landed on what we call now know as the lower 48 of the United States. So this was dealing with DeSoto, and that's why I say, again, you'll find DeSoto, which there's a town here in Texas that's named after him, DeSoto. So it's Hernando de DeSoto's claim, and I'll put his name in there. That way you have this, because I don't want anyone to just go off of what I'm saying. So I'm gonna put this in there so you can see and you can look up these names for yourself, and you'll find out that he was all over what we know as from Florida all the way into Texas and going to what now is known as New Mexico, and even parts of what we know now as Arizona. So he pretty much was exploring this whole region. You also come to find out, you always hear me talk about Esteban the Negro, Esteban the Moor, Esteban the AKA slave, which was nothing but an employee dealing with the Spanish and the Portuguese. So these people, the Natchez, and I don't want to say these people because I know I hate that terminology, but the Natchez, that they would go back and they would tell you, like I say, this is the 16th century, that they were and are the mound builders. People just say, oh man, we built the mounds, specifically because every tribe, right? I mean, you had different jobs within that tribe, but every tribe was specifically responsible for a particular task or skill set. They had something to do for that tribe when it came to confederacies, because again, there were confederacies amongst us. And I know most of us have done our research and knowing that what we know as the United States setup of government was copied off of the Confederacy. Specifically, they'll say the Iroquois. The Iroquois Confederacy, that's what they were able to see. But then we also know that the southern regions also had a confederacy. And then within that, we also had allegiances with other peoples, that, the Algonquian speaking people as well, and that they would all descend or ascend, go up to the great mound that we know that sits outside of, that sits in Illinois today, coming up the great river, the great Mississippi. So anyway, getting back to the Natchez, you will also find of Alvarado, and I'm gonna put his name in the chat. So these are the same people that these are all of these explorers that kept coming and were running into the people and saying the same thing. And remember, these are not your Dutch. These are not your Brits or the English. These are the ones that were coming along here. These are your Spaniards. These are your Portuguese. Remember, that were coming along here first, because that was the first wave of really the invaders. I don't want to include the Moors, because the Moors didn't come as far as being exploratory. The Moors already knew about this land because we had gone over there. They had come over here and dealing with trade. So when I start saying your first Europeans, I'm saying it from a standpoint of those that came to explore and later on exploit, and then later on conquer. Because it didn't start out that they all of a sudden just came over here and conquering us. So they talk about being the mound builders, and in this book he goes on and talk about what happened and the civil wars that took place amongst the tribes. Because I'll give you an example: the Choctaw and Chickasaw were all one people at one point. And again, the Natchez were the mound builders, your fortified people builders, and there were several other tribes, but I'm giving those main three to see what the disconnect was. So when the Choctaw and Chickasaw had their war and they split, where we at the Chickasaw today, the Natchez sided with the Chickasaw, and you'll see how it was a divide and conquer, because you have to recall at that time that Europe was just coming out of they call it the Dark Ages, but it's still coming out of. They were not as strong as we have been led to believe, because there's a point in time to where, remember, it was illegal for copper colored people to actually read. So that's why they were putting all these books together, to make it seem like they were just this great conquering, Europe came out of these great conquering uh, countries that were coming out of Europe, but actually we were the proxy that were being used to fight these wars and territories. And we started turning on each other when it came to the beaver trade, the fur trade, the buffalo as you start getting out further west. So all of this, and even further north. So all of this has to be taken into consideration, but they split. So one part remained the Choctaw, the other part remained the Chickasaw, and the Natchez went along with the Chickasaw. But the Natchez will always share with you that they specifically were and are the mound builders. The mound builders, it was twofold. One was dealing with the time. That's why we're going to get back to all these the timekeepers. And then two, fortified cities against the enemies that are coming up on high ground, because this gets back to one of the many, but the latest will be called Great Flood. And I see all the names in here, and we're amongst friends and family, and we all know that the Great Flood, the latest one, because there were several, but the latest one was global. That's why when people try to argue and they talk about Noah and the flood and all of that, but you're reading every single, or hear about it in every single culture all over the world, talks about the great flood, the great destruction that came about. So that's why I said certain places you can go all over the world. And I'm fortunate enough to live here in Texas, that, Palo Duro, and as you go further out west, you can see these man-made structures, but then you also see the water rings of these great structures. So the Natchez are letting you know, hey, we were here before that and along the Mississippi. Now, I'm going to give you another name of people, and it's going to describe it, actually what was called, and they tell you this. If you're able to go down to Belize, Guatemala, or even go to Cancun. So I'm gonna put the name in here, and then I'm gonna give you what they say today is the Mississippi Maya. But I'm also going to give you how it was spelled out a different way, and you're going to see certain names today. So the Mississippi Maya were also what you would see as Mishi Gua. So it's the same thing of saying Mississippi, and you'll also see it in that same tongue of where we get Michigan from. But these are your Mississippi Maya. So it was a group of people, different tribes, all within forming this particular nation or confederacy of people that were always here. And later on, because I know it'll probably be part 2 or 3 or 4 of these. See, exactly. So when you're understanding about the Mississippi nation, and understanding that they tell you that it's in Maya, but if you'll notice, you don't see these modern archaeologists and anthropologists. They never describe what these people look like. And then they keep swearing up and down that they didn't have a language and all this. And so what you have now, you have a new language that is blended in from the languages of the people that have come over of your Huguenots, your French, your Portuguese, your Spanish, which you'll find out that they say again that a lot of these people that came over were under the classification of Jews. They may have converted to other religious groups, but they were coming over here, and so you have a blend of these different languages, and so now you'll find that a lot of these modern, what they say, oh, this is my ancient tongue, this is how we said this and this and that. It is actually a blend of all of these different languages and cultures. Check Gabrielle Union up in this camp. Yes, exactly. And I and see and they what they want to go back to what you said about the said that the Seminoles called themselves Maya before the federal government identified them as Seminole. I'm gonna give you another name. Like I said, I'm gonna give you names so you can see for yourself. I I kind of talked about this. We kind of talked about this even a few years ago, a couple of years ago. But I'm gonna put a name in here so you can see who these people are and trace it back. Semi. Semi is your Seminole. When they keep saying, "Oh, this means the warriors are Semi." Semi, what we get the French, I mean the Spaniards call, Seminole, Seminole. They keep talking about in relationship to warriors, which it is, because this ties you back and you start seeing the same thing over and over. In the Yucatan, in Mexico, and when I talk about the Yucatan, I'm talking about, Honduras, I'm talking about Belize, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, all these other places that very rarely get talked about, especially when it comes to tribes. Because you notice a lot of people, and I'm be careful because like I said, I don't want to make anyone upset. When I say Native people, because again, most of those that have definitely been around any of us long enough know when we say, Native Americans, it just means you were born here, you're native to this land. It does not make you an American Indian. And I know y'all keep hearing me saying it over and over, and I sound like a broken record because I want to make sure that no one takes a snippet. Not you all in the chat, but I know people are listening. Yes, El Salvador, all of these places that we don't talk about when we start talking about, the Americas and who are the American Indian, and we never talk about these places. So Semi gets back to what they call the representation or the characterization of death. And the reason why Semi is the representation of death, which gets back to kissing bush, which gets back to the dance of the dead, is because they were the warriors and they knew when the Semi people, when they came into town and there was a war going on, that death followed them because they were not coming to play. They were never coming to play. And so those that come along that line that they call Seminoles, but they forget the Seminoles, and we'll get into that later too. They're breaking down dealing with the Buffalo Soldiers, how they sent the Seminoles down after the Civil War. That's still there, that bordered the towns down there that separated Texas from Mexico. And these are the things that they don't want to talk about. See, exactly, DJ. Same for me. Like I said, my folks are from Guatemala, and these people will tell you when you talk to them, the Mississippi. Like I said, it was the people. But I wanted to go back into how it ended up the way it was. When you study the red stick people, mostly everybody here has heard about the Red Stick Wars, but they'll tell you what happened. That the Gulf of Mexico at one time, it did not exist. It did not exist. It was land there. And it was after that last great flood, when people were getting away, that all of the waters didn't recede to have that dry land for them to walk across. So these red stick warriors that you later on, they'll say Creek, but they'll interchange Creek with these same other nations of people, and how they had the red sticks, and how you get to Nanawaya, where they said the mother mound. But it was because when they came back from where they were scattered and went back down into, or should I say, up into the Yucatan, and the waters receded, they went back to their lands along the Mississippi. So these red stick, when you get into these red stick wars, you'll start to see these are the same people. It's just that when Europeans were documented, they're calling us by different names. And you think, oh, it's all these different people. No, they're all the same people. They were just giving us different names. And so we have to understand that they called us by different names, but when we get back to who we are and understanding who we are, and I can guarantee you the majority of us listening now, that you keep finding the same names in your family over and over. Like I say, for me, it's James, all the way through. You see James, John, you see these certain names over and over. So it was telling us who we are, where we come from. That way we would never forget. So going back to the Natchez will tell you, now here's the kicker. There's some of those that are Natchez that when I go up there and talk to them in Oklahoma, they'll tell you, oh, we build the mounds, but they can never tell you why. They can never tell you why. And then they can never tie themselves back to, if you're not tying yourself back into where we started, like I said, and I'll do it this way, get back into what's called Mesoamerica, Middle America, the tip of South America, or the Caribbean islands. They never tie that back together. They never do. So they've gotten, that's why I said you got a remix of a remake of a remake of a remake. They're telling the story, but they don't tell you why. They can never tell. It's, oh, we built the mounds. Well, why were the mounds built? The mounds were built because it's, again, dealing with the calendar of knowing the time, and also fortified cities. Fortified cities. But I'm gonna keep going on with Sabo and his writings, and that's why they were talking about the temple would sit on top. And this is left out of a lot of writings, to current writings, because they don't look at that. There were structures on top of these mounds, or should I say, I don't keep calling them mounds, but that's what they've got, pyramids. There were fortified structures that were on top of these mounds. And so when you're on top of that mound, that structure, and you're in that fortified area, you can see for miles and miles and miles. So if any enemy, anything, any danger, any change in the weather coming about, you can see all of that for miles. And as you get deeper into the writings of the first explorers or the Europeans, they'll tell you that they lived within those fortified areas. Because remember, they coming over here, they don't have anything. They only have what's on the ship, and they have limited, even limited ammunition. This is why we go from, hey, they came over here from day one in 1492, they started kicking our butt. I've said this before and I'll say it again. If someone were to roll up in my house and they try to take over my house, because my dad, my mother, my grandmother, I always say the same thing. Nobody should be able to whoop you in your own house because you know where everything is. So how are people that are coming over here off ships, starving to death? Some of them were shipwrecked when they got to the shores. How did all of a sudden, 1492, bam, here we go. Everybody's enslaved. They got this whole thing. It didn't work that way. And you'll find out that a lot of things did not shift. And even what we call into modern day, what we think of as chattel slavery, started a lot later than we think. And then when we realize that chattel slavery, as we knew it, started later than we think, then you start getting into the time frame. It doesn't make sense. Again, you'll find out that it was more American Indians that were put into slavery due into being prisoners of war. That's gets you into King Philip's War. You start to see that There was no what you call prison system. So you were enslaved for your 7 years or 14 years to pay the debt. And after your debt was paid, then hey, I go back to my tribe. And you'll find that getting back into Crispus Attucks and dealing with his ancestors, why they say, oh, he disappeared, because it says again that his slave owner, he's like, my time is up. I'm supposed to be free. You didn't let me free. So Crispus Attucks broke camp. So if Crispus Attucks, right, and we all know that Crispus Attucks was American Indian, so and he was a descendant of King Philip. So if we're looking at Crispus Attucks and saying, okay, he went back amongst his people, but he was just a so-called slave, so they threw that in, oh, he was just a slave, then again, during the Boston Massacre, why do you hear more about Crispus Attucks than you hear about the other men that were also killed? That was part of his entourage, because Crispus Attucks was royalty. So if Crispus Attucks was nothing but a slave, how do you use that as a catalyst to get into the Revolutionary War? Because you wouldn't go into war over a slave getting killed. Doesn't make sense. Yes, sir. That's right, Brother Copper. He's called an Indian. He wasn't called like, oh, the Negro, this. No, he was an Indian. And he was an Indian chief. He was going back to, he was amongst his people, the Massawet. So you get back and get where they get the Massachusetts. He's going back to his people, because he said, I paid my debt. My people paid the debt on what was owed, and I'm going back home. And since he didn't let him go, he broke camp, because it tells you that he was a sailor, he was a whaler, he was all of these other things. So how was he able to do all this stuff if you so-called a slave? I know I'm on my soapbox, and I apologize, but I just wanted to understand that it wasn't, 1492, and then all HW hockey sticks broke loose. And this is where we are today. It didn't work like that. And we're going to do a series again on the Melungeons, because the Melungeons have the other part of the story. They have the rest of the story that nobody talks about, that folks up there in Harlem World and all the rest of that stuff with Joe Jackson, they don't want to discuss who these Africans were. And then we find out these Africans were Portuguese. These 20 and odd Negroes were Portuguese, and how they became these free Africans that were over here, and with the American Indian and the other Europeans formed that group called Melungeons. But the Natchez also talked about the great spirit. The great, you keep hearing this over and over. Like I said, I'm using the terminology of what was translated, now known as the modern day of English. So they talk about the great spirit. They talk about the four sisters, and you'll get into what the collection of books called the Bible tell you about, the seven sisters and the 4 points, where you hear the 4 corners of the earth. You'll hear these same things over and over. Why even the ancient Mayas believed that the earth was a square versus a circle being round, because it gets back to the 4 corners. And we could put out most of these. I won't go into all of the tribes, but I'll try to get into the majority of the tribes, especially in the South, because your Algonquian people are a mixture of some of those that came from what we call South America and the Antilles, and then a mixture of those that actually came from the North that were actually dark or swarthy as well, because we've been bamboozled into believing, again, that that the majority of Europeans were what we call Caucasian today, or what they classified themselves as white, and that classification didn't come until later on. And you'll find out that a lot of people that are classified as white today were not classified as white until the late 1800s, and even in some cases going into the 1900s, on why they were not classified as white. Yes, sir, Brother Copper, and that's it. And you'll see the symbolism, even in that as well. That you'll find that a lot of flags, in the Caribbean, and also even what they call the Jamaican flag, because the Jamaican flag is actually the Garifuna or the Garinagu flag. They won't tell you that. So the like I said, the mound, and I'm gonna give you what it's called today. And this is still in Mississippi. It is one of the mounds that they call it's called the Grand Village of the Natchez. And this mound is still, well, they can't do anything with the mounds because the way they built them. I see Gabrielle Union dropping them nuggets in here too. I see you. Yes, those words on English, like I said, that English language comes along later because a lot of they'll tell you the English language is a Germanic language, but it's mixed with words that are over here. Because if you don't have a word for it, it's like if you're speaking, like if you're, and I know Brother Copper has traveled a lot more than I have. So Brother Copper, if you're in Asia, right, and someone is talking to you and you're talking to them about a computer, is there a word that they use for a computer, or they just say computer? And so you'll find, like I say, when you find out these are long words, and then if someone comes over and does not know how to pronounce something correctly, and that word takes off, although it's mispronounced, it'll take off. So I put that in there. I'm dealing with the great village of the Natchez. Exactly, Mike Easton, former quarterback of the New England Patriots. So these are, thank you, Brother Cop. These are things that when we go into our studies and we're understanding these things, then it'll start to make sense. And remember what I put in the chat on Mississippi and how we got the word Mississippi, because it's just a derivative from the main word of where we are. Which, like I said, you'll find the word of Michigan, Michigan. These are we're dealing with the same group of people. But I'm also going to put a word in the chat that how this word, because we don't pay attention to it, you'll notice that these Mississippi people fall under this. Y'all see that? So every time you see Muskogee, replace that with Mississippi, because these are the same people. Muskogee it's just a mispronunciation of dealing with the word that we get Mississippi from. Mishi Gua. Muskogee. Same people. And no matter where you go, you can even talk to them sucker MCs and everybody else. They cannot dispute this. It's the same people. That's why you'll find like all these different tribes, all these different nations, and then it'll say, "Oh, the Muskogee people." So if you're the Muskogee, if they're saying that these are the Muskogee people, you should be able to discuss your clan, your family, your clan, your tribe, and then how you fit into that particular nation. What did your people do? So you'll find out that these fortified cities that were there, and you will hear that the Spaniards, this is where it started, well, the Portuguese initially, and the Spaniards could not penetrate these fortified cities, and how the Natchez led the charge to run the Portuguese / Spaniards out of what we know as the Southeast, or the Gulf, what became later known as the Gulf states of the United States, because they could not penetrate those. And later on, you come to find out that they were the ones, the Natchez, that would build these, well, you see these huge, what they call slave plantation. This is just still gets back to their craftsmanship on being the master builders, and how these buildings that are built for these college campuses are still in existence. Like, oh, this was established in 1843, and it's still standing. Of course, they had to do a little bit of restructuring, but for the most part, those buildings are still standing. You don't read where they had to tear those buildings down and build them back up. You're like, wait a minute, these buildings are almost 200 years old, and they're still standing. And no offense to my African brothers and sisters, you don't find structures like that in West Africa. So these could not have been West Africans if the Europeans didn't know how to build it, and the West Africans didn't know how to build it. How all of a sudden they get over here in a foreign land and get smart enough to be able to build these fortified buildings and literally the forts, which in another live, we'll start talking about Fort Smith, Arkansas, and the importance of Fort Smith. The fort that was there was a Natchez fort. It was already there. Mind you, the Europeans that were coming over here were living in huts. They were not living in homes. And then later on, they were living in log cabins. They weren't built, they were not building these forts. These forts were already here. So you can't go from, and I even go as far as, Abraham Lincoln, a Melungeon is, they tell you, born in a log cabin. Come on, son. Come on, son. These folk, again, were living in log cabins. Because they went from the huts they were living in, really using the boards of the ships that they would tear down to try to keep cover from the shelter. And it was American Indians that were giving them shelter. Because again, they knew nothing about the land. Europeans knew absolutely nothing about the land. Exactly, brother. See, you are already ahead of the game. Next time we're going to all have to come up here because you're already ahead of the game. When they keep talking about these master builders that all of a sudden have disappeared. And they mysteriously left down. No. They didn't get wiped off the face of the earth. They just still walking around here with amnesia because they got hit in the head. If I take you're reading it in every single American Indian culture, especially down in the southern region, what I call the Muskogee people, that they would get the elders drunk, give them that rum, and because they all friendly, and then they would take your kids. So if I'm taken from my family at the age of 2 or 3, and I'm indoctrinated with Caucasians are great, Europeans are great, we came over here and gave you civilization, you all were savages. Now you hearing that at 2 and 3, and that's all you hearing. Then they let you go back home at 18, 19, 20 years old. That's all you've been hearing. So now you walking around like the Help and Get Out. They have taken your mind out, put in their mind, send you back to your people, and now you're telling them this is all good. And never firing a shot. Notice that, never firing a shot. So, see, Sister Gabrielle, you dropping more nuggets in there too. Or should I say doctor? I'll have to put some respect on your name. So you're going into the land, and then I'll start getting into, because of family issues, and I say family, just like your regular family, you get into a battle, and then one side of the family aligns themselves with these outsiders, and the other side of the family align themselves with the outsiders. And this is where it was drawn to. So the Natchez started going amongst the Chickasaw, the Catawbas, those is known as the Cherokee, which is where it gets you into Arkansas, Tennessee area. I'll keep going up, up the Mississippi and even hitting into the Missouri, because they were already familiar with these other tribes, these groups of people, because they were the mound builders. They built these fortified structures. So much so, you thinking that these were built thousands of years ago and they're still standing. And in some cases, even the dynamite blast could not destroy these mounds. So if the dynamite blast could not destroy these mounds, you know that these were fortified places. They couldn't do it because the Spanish will tell you, hey, we tried to. We put our cannons, we hit our cannons, and we'll get into that, like I said, in another live stream. They kept hitting them with the cannons, and it wouldn't do anything. It'll put a little dent in them. Then you're gonna find out that when you get to these Olmec heads, you see it's a bunch of cannon divots in it, but they couldn't destroy it. Look at a lot of these Olmec heads. So I say Ula heads, which is gonna get back to Alibamu, which gets back to these same people are telling you where they are from. The Ula gets back to the Ula River that you'll find in Honduras. You look at these Olmec heads. You get a chance, just Google some of these Olmec. You'll see all these divots in them where they tried to destroy their faces, because once you knew the distinguished facial features, you're like, oh man, this group of people, that's that group of people. But then when it comes to the Americas and the Mississippi, the Mississippians, the Mississippi tribes, Mississippi Maya, why is it that they're not showing any of the little trinklets? They're not showing what they look like. They'll tell you, oh, this other, we found an arrowhead, and we found this, and we found that. So again, you start to find out that it was the conquistadors. They were shooting their cannons at these Olmec heads, and the divots are in there, but you still can make out who they are. Then they said, oh snap, we don't want to show any recognition. So now they start digging, and that's why you find something of them buried. Now, mind you, it's not like, the vegetation or the grass was growing over. They were finding these heads buried. These Olmec heads were buried, that they weren't discovering until the 1800s. All these Olmec heads started popping up underground. They were buried underground because they could not destroy the stone heads. So can you imagine? That's just they just steady firing at a stone head. Look at all those divots that are in those stone heads. And you can still make out the facial features. So imagine them trying to use their cannons. Now, mind you, they could get Amazon, and get a new package of cannons. You gonna run out of ammo. So they steady shooting at these fortified places and could not penetrate them. Like I said, we'll get into that in a later live stream. That's right. That's right. These arrowheads found in the backyards. Exactly, Brother Copper. Like I said, we're gonna all have to come up here because you're breaking it down when you talk about the Uli people. Like I said, these structures were here long before. Long before. That's what they talk about the four when they said they came down into what we know as the Americas first. Then going to Egypt and China. They don't, but the people don't want to have these open dialogue, these discussions, and you'll see how these fortified places, these fortified structures are still here. And it all ties back to, and I did this a few years ago, and I was trying to get a hold of her, but had not been able to with Dr. Mayat when she was breaking down on the pyramids in Egypt and who built them, but she never said who the people were. All she said was they were writing down things in red ochre. And then you get to where other anthropologists were going and saying what they were writing in red ochre that the Egyptians couldn't read, nor the people that are in the land today, they couldn't read it, because it gets back to the Quiche Mayan language and its dates. The same people that you see again is dealing with dates. And a little later on, we'll talk about that too. We'll start talking about these dates. Again, history is not time driven, it's event driven. So a certain event would happen, you know about these dates because these people were the time keepers, which is why we are living in what's called the fifth age. Remember, everyone was talking about, 2012, the world ending. No, it wasn't the world, it was the age. That age. So what we know is the fifth, and we know the people here were much longer, older than that, but it goes back to where they started the event. An event, a worldwide global event that took place, and from there, we are now in the fifth age. So these Natchez were building these structures to help those that knew the time. So I asked, do you know what time it is? So they're building these structures, which is why when you go all down and you look at all the structures now that you'll find in Mesoamerica, and they keep saying Aztec, and I say, no, not Aztec. Aztec are the Johnny come latelys. Because the Aztec, all they did the same thing that the Romans did to the Greeks. That we had our own deities, we had our own structures, we had our own towns, and they just changed the name. Like the Greeks have Zeus, and you go to Romans, who came later, and then use like Jupiter. Same deity, same personality, same story, different name. So you'll see a lot of these, like I said, when you get tech at the end, or the TL at the beginning, where they change the Chaklock, and it's Chok. It's all these different deities or characteristics of the Great Spirit or dealing with nature. They just change the names, but it's the same thing. So when they keep saying about Aztecs, because Aztecs couldn't even go back as far and tell the story, because they were searching, and I'll put in another book, and we'll discuss this a little bit later, that when they were talking about who built these pyramids, who built these mounds. So the first people at that time, the Aztecs were ruling, and the Aztecs said, no, it wasn't us. And they said, well, now you can go back to the Toltecs. And the Toltecs say, no, wasn't us. So now you got to have a discussion with, those that they call the Maya, and they say, no, what particularly wasn't us, it was those that were before us that built these. These were here before in a particular people, which gets back to your Natchez, because again, and I'm gonna put these names in here. And matter of fact, I know, Brother Carrie Bay, I know you're busy, but if you get a chance, I'm gonna put this in here. I know you're a little bit away from Baton Rouge, but not too far. Baton Rouge, Red Stick. That's why I say get to those Red Stick people to tell you how they came here. Exactly. There you go, Brother Copper. That's why I tell you Kukulkan. Quetzalcoatl is the Aztecian name of Kukulkan. Well, when you get a chance, Brother Carrie Bay, if you're still in here, I know you're a busy man, but you get a chance to see that. If you can find a way to get there to LSU for us, or Brother No Sellout, when you go down and see your people, ask somebody, some of your folk down that way to find that book that is in the library. I took snippets because you can actually, the great thing about, like I said, being in a digital age, it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is you can log in to some of these libraries or these colleges that they have these books, and you can do a free account. At least they let you get limited pages from that account. And then the other part is how they start, when it's digitized, how they start trying to modernize and be politically correct with these names. Now, I'm going to give you the American Historical Society. Remember that name, the American Historical Society. Why is the American Historical Society, that is headquartered out of DC, why are they responsible for the Mexican Museum of History in Mexico City? Why are they in charge of the books in Belize? Why are they in charge of the artifacts in Guatemala? Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but just me following the breadcrumbs for all these decades leads me to, they want to cover up who the people actually are. Because if the people actually found out who they are and who they were, then things will begin to change when you know who you are. So I wanted to put that in there, and I'm going to put another one in there. If some of y'all are in Florida, I saw one before, was mentioned about, the Seminole and being in Florida, but don't let them fool you, because it gets back to, again, the semi. And like I said, and like I said, I've discussed semi before, and the semi people, and these were the same people again that they call the Guerreros and the Guerreras in I don't know. Yeah, okay, let me put it in there. So these are references that I'll give you, and then once you start going into that, and the people that are in that area, and they'll start to tell you, they'll keep telling you, because you don't hear people saying, oh, well, we came here from Africa and we did this from Africa, and you'll find out, wait a minute, these people were shuffling us around. So how could they be shuffling us around? And and they saying that they brought this over here, but again, it wasn't 1492. Bam, you enslaved. It didn't work. It never worked that way. It never worked that way. You don't come in and take over people just by, okay, I'm just gonna come in and just bam. You gotta know something about the culture, and I know that from having served in the Army. They send people over already in advance, and you have to know the culture. You start living amongst the people. You start going in. They start inviting you over to their houses, and you blending in, and you coming in as a friendly. Well, now you're amongst them, and they trust you, but you're going in, and you're dealing with espionage and being a spy and all these other things. So now you're sending back information to your people, which is the same thing, and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. It's been the same tactic. So as you get into, like I say, these mound builders that built these fortified places, which also were these same ones that built these stone heads. I want to challenge someone. If you're able to go to an old fort, or what they call, even the Spanish later on they call missions, and if you get a chance to actually go to Mexico and touch a stone head, one of the of what they call the Olmec, which is the Uli, if you touch that stone or stones and touch some of the structures of these, what they call missions, or they say later on it was a church mission, whatever, but these were fortified places, and it's the same type of stone. I'll say that again. It is the same type of stone. It's not a coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a coincidence, brothers and sisters. These are the people of like I said, the Natchez, and the Natchez will go back and dealing with these red sticks. So you'll notice how they'll try to say, oh, well, the red sticks, that gets into the creeks. But then you start to find out, well, wait a minute, you're talking about the creek, and then you're saying, well, the creek or the Muskogee people, the Mississippi people. See how they try to divide you and say, well, oh no, I'm a Creek, so I'm here, which is a misnomer as well, which gets back into that language that they calling you a Creek, but for the sake of everybody being on the same page, you're thinking, oh, well, the Creeks, well, they were Georgia and here, da. But then they'll tell you again, they're Muskogee people. We cannot get away from that. Muskogee people. And when the Spaniards came to Florida and they say that the tiger people, these cat people, because they would make the stripes on their face, which you see the U.S. military do that now. You go in the areas, you see they get the paint and put those stripes on their face. And they said these tiger people that ran them out of Florida, which gets back to these Seminoles. And they try to say, oh, these Africans. No, that was a mixture of some Africans, but that's going to get back. We're going to discover that or discuss that for another time, that these Africans came over here, were free Africans, but who later on, because they look like us, got blended in. Because you think the slave trade was cut off. You got, like I said, it's following these timelines. When it's cut off, and you still got to deal with the crops of sugar and cotton. So now I'm kidnapping folk. And one of the best examples I can give you of 12 Years a Slave. He wasn't the only one that was kidnapped. Remember, he was a free African. Had his Moorish name. And they kidnapped him and brought him where? To Louisiana. This was nothing new. This was nothing new. So they were kidnapping free Africans and making them work because, again, the expense of the slave trade. And I know that, like I said, and I don't want to blend things, and we'll probably have to discuss that a little later when we talk about slaves, but dealing in the fact of employees. Because it wasn't this chattel slavery and you're a slave, in perpetuity. That wasn't, it wasn't all of a sudden, bam, this is what happened. You'll find out it happened later than what we think. And you'll find out a lot of these so-called slaves, especially those that were sent to the islands and the islands that were sent, it was a rotation. We defeat y'all on the mainland, we're going to ship you down to the Caribbean. Those that were on the Caribbean islands will ship you into the Yucatan, which is dealing with the same people. That's why you'll read about more uprisings and rebellions, and I would say a continuation of the war in that region, because all you were doing was reuniting them with the people that there are folk that were already there on the mainland. So, keep your hands at 10 and 2, brother. No sellout. 10 and 2, man. Let me speeding up the interstate, man. 10 and 2. But when they, like I said, but breaking it down and seeing, hey, these people, and when you start, and I've always said this, that culture trumps everything else. What were the people in your culture doing? You have to look at it. And then folks try to say, no, that's not you. You just trying to adopt somebody else's culture. But you cannot ignore the writings and the descriptions of the explorers, and I call it, because the first group were explorers. They were not the conquistadors. They weren't the conquerors yet. They were explorers first. The writings of these Jesuits, the writings of these Druids, the writings of these monks or friar, same thing. You cannot ignore when they were writing down the description and doing their little drawings of the description. And I still go back to any mestizo, these mixture folk that try to come in and want to argue with me, and I have to shut them down. All I do is put up the pictures of Bonaparte. And I double dog there, and I said, show me the people in the family that look like the people on these walls. I double dog dare you. Show me the people in your family, mestizo, that look like the people on these walls. Well, no, I don't want to hear, well, show me the people that look like the people on these walls. And if you swear up and if you're looking at it, you're like, man, because of what we've been taught, you're like, man, these were Africans. But then you're looking again and saying, wait a minute, these people have already been here. And then again, it tells you that, again, I'll go back to Esteban. If you're looking at Esteban and it says that he was able to blend in with the Indians that were here because he looked like them, and you go back and say, well, Esteban was and is a Moor. And if he looked like the people that were already over here and they've been here, that's going to tell you right there, they are the people that were on the walls that were already here. And all you have to do, and in a couple of months, Mardi Gras is coming up. And you'll see people that are classified as Black, Negro, African American, colored. They're the ones that still carry on that tradition, that will have the colorful suits with all of those feathers. You don't see other people that call themselves Indian like that. They'll get on there. Like I say again, you look at the instruments on the walls of Bonaparte. You look at the instruments that are being played over here. Brother Turtle Gang had even brought it out where he said how the spirit, the vibe, the rhythm, how hip hop came from. No offense to my West African brothers and sisters, but their drum beat and the beats that are over here that we have initially are a different vibe. They're a different vibe. Anyone that knows anything about, man, I'm gonna try to find someone that's really a great major in music, and they would tell you that these are different vibes, different vibrations. The drums were different. Listen to them in the Caribbean, like I said, dealing with the maracas. That's over here. The types of drums over here, the whole rhythm, the whole vibe of those that came from the Caribbean, the Arawak that settled up in what we know as New York, where hip hop was born. It's a different vibe. It is totally different. And if you notice that when those that are now misclassified as African Americans over here, that when a trend is started amongst our people, it goes throughout the globe. No other people can say that. You look at all of the trends, they start here. But I'll go back. I digress. I apologize. But I wanted to go back and I wanted to say a bit about the Natchez and them being the mound builders. Like I said, the next time we do this, because I promise I won't be long. See how long we've been on here. Okay, a little over an hour. I'll go 5 more minutes, then I'll shut it down. And like I said, I'll keep coming back and pick up where we left off. And then I will also continue to go into depth, showing you that these are these people. So you'll find out, I'm going to put this word in the chat to where it goes back to those that keep saying, see, Brother Marcus, you own to something. That's why I said they were dropping nuggets in that movie that if you've been studying long enough or just a little bit, you'll say, wait a minute. And especially when they start streaming it on Disney Plus, I advise you, go back and start looking at that stuff and breaking it down. Because I don't want you to pay your money to go back to the movies. But start looking at it and start saying, hold up, stop, wait a minute, pause. These are the same cultures of the same people on what they're doing. And I had mentioned that before about how they would take the piece of jade and put it under the tongue of those that have passed on. And when you go to Belize and Guatemala, where the jade mines are, they still will tell you about how they would put that piece of jade underneath their tongue when they would pass away, when they would transition. And the significance of that jade when you would go into the other dimension hasn't changed. It has not changed. But this, again, is what the Cherokee call these Natchez. I'm gonna put it in the chat. Hold on. And when you see that, you'll start to see, wait a minute, some of these same words and these same thing, I'm starting to see a pattern here. Starting to see a pattern here. This is what the Cherokee, remember, Cherokee, their cousin, what they were being called, they would call them this. Why? The Ani. Well, you get back to your auntie. Gets back to where they get the word again, Indians from, that people try to say, oh no, James Flynn, doodle, you don't know what you're talking about. Again, Andes, Andes, is nothing but the long word in Spanish for dealing with the auntie Suyu. They will tell you that they're coming back. The auntie Suyu, the Twa Asituyu, is dealing with the four. Because all the people are doing is recreating what happened in the beginning. Those four, you'll start to see those four structures again. Those four, your square. Four corners of the earth. It still gets back talking about these same people. Why? The Cherokee, and the Cherokee, even though that's another misnomer in how that word came about. But these people that were there, again, the Cherokee are a mixture of your Algonquian language speaking people and your Muskogee language people. So why are they calling these people that? These Ani, saying that they're telling you they go way back. These are these ancient ones that are going way back and dealing with who they are. Remember, names. People always ask you when they come up, and even when you go to a conference or something or a convention, they give you name tags. Because it used to be, before they give you the name tags, they would always people ask you, well, what is your name? And then they ask you, well, where are you from? Well, what do you do? The same questions that your granny or your mama would ask of your friends when you introduce, say, Mama, this is such and such. This is James Flames. Well, nice to meet you, James Flames. Well, where are you from? I'm from Texas. Well, what do you do? Who are some of your folk? As they get to know you, they're going to ask you, what is your name? What is your name? There is so much power, and I know those coming out of the church, and I don't want to try to correlate that. But there's power in a name. They know who you are, which is why when you fill out any type of application, school application, job application, any type of application, what is at the top? What is always at the top? Your name. See, Dr. Gabby, you're going to make me pull you up in here. I know you're busy. We're going to make me pull you up in here anyway. What is in a name? It's telling you that these are these ancient people. These are some of the ancient people that were already here. And they also mentioned about how they reached from, this is just with the Natchez people of North Carolina, Eastern Oklahoma, Minnesota, down into the Gulf of Mexico. These are these same people. Same people. And in March, I will be in Nacogdoches, which is in East Texas, Southeast Texas. And I'm going to go live. And for those who, oh, what do he look like? I am going to show my face as I'm walking along, dealing with these structures that are in Nacogdoches. I'm going to give you another name of somebody, and you can look him up for yourself. William Going. Folks try to label him where he's buried there. They try to label him and say, oh, African American. I said, no, he's not. And I contacted the Historical Society of the area, and upon further review, oh, snap, they come to find out. They said, wait a minute. Oh, he's an Indian. Not only was an Indian, he was what is equated to be a millionaire. And specifically, not only just American Indian, but he was Natchez. Oh, snap. What is this Natchez man doing in Nacogdoches? Nacogdoches is nothing but the French version of the Natchez people. Oh, snap. What in Sam Hill? Who is it? And then they're going to say, oh, he's mulatto. He this, he that. They try to give him all these types. No. He's Natchez. And they had to go back and change it. Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you, James Flames, for letting me, yeah. Because you're not gonna keep erasing us out of history. Not erasing us, but relabeling us to what you deem fit. Because at the time, like I say, these titles were not going on. I gave y'all earlier about Charles V. What was he calling these people? That he was saying from these islands, hey, these are the ones that I'm referring to. They are heathens, they are pagans, and you also get back into where you're going, even Benjamin Franklin mentioned. When he said, if these heathens, which when you get back to heathen and what a heathen is nothing but goes back what they call these mound builders, heap. When someone says you're in a heap of trouble, means you're in a mount of trouble. You're in a mound of trouble. So your words and names mean things. Yes, ma'am. What's in a name? Everything. So these same people tell you where they stretch from. A lot of these forces, you start to find out a lot of these military bases that are here in what we call the United States of America, you'll find out that they were already established as American Indian forts, places of fortitude, of high ground. So as you start getting into it, I mentioned when we talk about the Carolinas, Fort Bragg. So I found out the history of Fort Bragg, because this is what we came named to know as white people when they classify themselves as white. Here's what they do. They build their forts at the places where fortified cities already existed, the lands of other people. And now when the Army Corps of Engineers, they made these man-made lakes, and they have buried our history underwater. Go to these forts and you say, well, how does fort does this go back in, and who built it? And all of a sudden they say, oh, this fort was established in, 1820. Well, who built it? They won't ever tell you who built it, because they did not have the technology, the advancement to build these places. Greeting, Choctaw Mac. Yes, sir. I'm keep banging. I don't have a choice but to keep banging. So these forts were already here. And you'll find out. So I said, not trying to make anybody upset. But when I talk about these Native Americans, When you go, they're like, oh man, I talked to this person and I went to, their res and I did this but they can't go into detail. They cannot go into detail and tell you what they just say, oh, we were always here. Well, where did you go during the great deluge, during the great flood? The latest, like I said, there were several great floods, but during the latest great flood of the last age, or should I say the third age, because that's when the last one took place. In the third age, where did you go? You had to have gone somewhere for your people to survive. So where did you go? And they can't tell you. Because when you're hearing stories, if they sit up amongst you and they're hearing stories and then they adopt you in and give you, and I'll give you an example. And then I'm gonna wrap up. I'll give you an example. If anyone has seen the interview between Godfrey, the comedian Godfrey, he has his own podcast, and this other gentleman that calls himself a Jew. And when they get into the discussion, because Godfrey is Igbo, and then the guy says, "Well, yeah, I was adopted into the Igbo." He's what's known as, like I say, he's a Sephardic Jew. That's where he says he is. He said, "How they adopted into the Igbo," and then he gives his Igbo name. They adopted him. They adopted this Caucasian man into their Igbo tribe, and now he has an Igbo name. So as he's sitting there, he'll get some bits and pieces of the Igbo and jot it down, because now he's trying to do a documentary on the Igbo people and jot it down. But you don't get the rest of it, because if his children come along and they say, oh, my dad was Igbo and his is Igbo name. Okay, well, where did you come from? Where did you originate? It stops there. So now you got a lot of people that are in charge of these tribes. And when people get said, oh, well, they're the ones that run the casinos. Yep, that's true, because the way they have everything set up. But they can't tell you their origins. Why? Because, yes, some of our tribesmen, they did adopt them in. Sometimes it was a sign of peace when you're dealing with war, saying, okay, now that your son, your European son, has married my American Indian daughter, or even vice versa. So you're not getting all of those nuggets. So when you start talking about the names, what did the people call themselves and what did their neighbors call them? Then you start to find out who these people are. That's why you cannot get away from who you are and what you do and why people do what they do in your family. Because while getting into these names, you'll start to find out that these Natchez come along the Catawba during these times of the war, when we get into the 1700s. How they went amongst certain tribes. Well, why were the Natchez accepted in these tribes? Because they already knew if you wanted to build a fortified city, you were going to contact the Natchez people. And again, a lot of these places, especially in New Orleans, Mississippi, not necessarily so much Alabama, but New Orleans, Mississippi, and getting into the east part of Texas, you will find these are just French pronunciations, or the French way of saying the names of these tribes, the names of these people. Like I said, you get into to Nacogdoches. I could type Nacogdoches in the room, and if people didn't know that it was Nacogdoches, matter of fact, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna put it in there for you, and then I'm gonna wrap up. Dr. Gabrielle Union, you know you up there, you doing some things, and you wait till I get you up here. You and Brother Copper, and Brother No Sellout, and Brother Kerry, because I know he's busy too. But I'm going to I'm gonna type this in the room. I just got to. Like I said, when you start seeing these names and you saying, man, how do they get how to pronounce that from that? Nacogdoches. I can't wait. I can't wait, Brother Copper. Look at that, Nacogdoches. These are the same Natchez people. But when you go there and you go, like I said, across the tracks, and you talk to the people and you talk to the elders in there that say, baby, we were always here. We were always here. Because you got to explain this. We're getting into the height of what they call slavery in the Americas. In 1800, and this is only along what we call the New England states, and then getting into Georgia. So this is just the Atlantic coast. Only 60% of people own slaves. Notice I didn't say white people, because there were American Indians that owned slaves. There were Africans that came over here that owned slaves. And there were some Caucasians that owned. So 60%, this is all the people that we would call racists today, or groups of people today combined. That was 1800. 60%, that's just there. So remember, 1800, find a map, Google a map, and say the United States in 1800. So you're going to tell me that slavery swept the nation, right? From 1800 to 1865. It just went crazy like that. And thousands of people. Now, I do know about the large plantation that was in Louisiana. I'll never take that away, but you'll find out who the people are and who was sent there. We're gonna start back to having study groups. I'll leave that up to the crew out. Everybody been kind of dispersed because everybody's been building their own things with their family and stuff. And once we get Dr. Gabrielle Union come up here, is because I know she was the one that could really break down your horticulture, and Brother Copper can talk about those things, because he, like I said, he's literally traveled the globe, and you'll see how it all starts to interconnect. So soon, and very soon. So you start to see, like Dr. Gabrielle Union had put in the chat, they were not. So when they talk about these shows about, oh, we need to go out west, and everybody think, oh, that's California, that's Wyoming, and that's Idaho. No, going west was going into the west part of Pennsylvania, going to what's known as Ohio, and going into Tennessee. That was going out west. And you're going to find out that those lands were actually occupied by Melungeons, those that were not accepted in what they started calling what became later on as white society. And they ended up going on the other side, like I said, the Appalachian Mountains, where you hear, again, this is the one thing that they would do to try to discredit a people. They would start to say you're cannibals. Just like the movie The Hills Have Eyes. Remember, they were cannibals. Same thing they said about dealing with the caribou, which are your Arawak, Taino, all of these people from the Antilles, again, and anti-Indian. That's why they call it the West Indies. It wasn't by accident. The West Indies. All these people that went there, what did they write about? To keep people out there and say, oh, they're cannibals. Okay, if we were cannibals, why do you keep sending people over here? Why do you want to come to a land full of people that eat humans? It doesn't make sense. So the Natchez, again, are building these fortified cities, and you'll find out these places that's like, oh man, fortified cities, how they get their name, Fort Smith, Arkansas, and you go down there, and when they shut down Fort Polk in Louisiana, all these places you start to find out, like I say, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Fort Worth, Texas. You know, see, it was these Natchez people that had already established these forts down there in San Antonio, where you're going to the Alamo. And outside of the Alamo, about I think it's a block away or so, probably a little bit more than a block, you will find these missions that are still there. Like I say, if you touch the walls of these missions that are still there, and if you're able to touch And then you have to run out of the museum. I know they have it kind of roped off, but touch those, rub on those heads, or those old make heads. When your significant other wants to go down to Mexico, to go to Cancun, to get their hair braided and all that stuff. So no, babe, we're gonna go here. We're gonna go to Veracruz. We're gonna go to Lorenzo. These are the places we're gonna go to. We're gonna take that tour. And I just want to touch the head. And then you come on up, come on back and go to San Antonio and start touching and going to these places and start touching these missions. And you're like, man, it is the same stone. The same stone. There you go, Dr. Gabrielle Union. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Brother Copper Indio. We are the monsters in their horror movie. We are these monsters. That's why they try to demonize us and always have. Well, they even get back to the dance of the devil, as it's called now. When we didn't get into the Day of the Dead and the dance of the devils. Because if they're coming and trying to destroy us and we clap back and we're destroying them, as the guerreros, which is the women warriors, and the guerrero, which is the men warriors, to them we are devils because they trying to destroy them. Like, wait a minute, y'all trying to destroy us? We're gonna destroy you. So you hear about all these other uprisings, but these Natchez, like I said, I'm gonna wrap it up here. 2 minutes. These Natchez that we continue to see are all throughout what we know as the Gulf Coast region, and even getting up into, I'll tell you, going up into what we know as Illinois and all the rest of these places where you get names like Chicago, Chez, all these same people, Michigan, all these places. They couldn't change the names. They didn't change the names. All they did was give you a watered down version on how they pronounce certain things. And when we start getting into names and etymology, that's why it is so important, because people keep saying, we did this and we did that and we did this. Now, I will tell you something that we did, that I tell you my people did. Like I said, it was a mistake of going to war with the Chickasaw and the Natchez. My people, that's why I said it was things that I know that my people have done. Because again, I still got people in Mississippi, I have people in Florida, I have people in the Caribbean, I have people that were raised on the reservations in Oklahoma, I have people that, like I say, in Texas area where I am, people still down there in Hall Creek area, people still down there in Guatemala and Belize. And we went to war with our own people, and that's what the Choctaw-Chickasaw divide is. And the Natchez sided with the Chickasaw, and and that's why I said one of the things that I wanted to do, and I wanted to bring this out. Exactly, we is French. we is although we physically, and it's something that some people don't understand. And when I say some people, those that classify themselves as white, when they say, I wasn't living back then and neither were you. But there is something called reconciliation. And I would like to, even if it's, because it may not be able to be done physically, but at least on a conference call or on a bill, not on a live, but actually in a group together, that apologies need to be given for the atrocities and the wrongdoing for our ancestors. Because if we're saying, our ancestors are living through us and we came from our ancestors, okay, well, as well as the good things that our ancestors have done, then those atrocities are in us as well. So on behalf of the ancestors, I know I owe the Chickasaw people, the Natchez people, the Catawba people a formal apology. Because we cannot sit here and just talk about and romanticize, like what some people do about Egypt. They romanticize all the good stuff that Egypt has done. And they never discuss, the negative things that were done. So, Brother Copper, see, he's breaking it down. Because they even got to say stuff in Chicago that is covered up, that is built, because all these cities are built upon civilization, upon civilization, upon civilization. And they did not bother to change the names. Look at these names, what it was called before. Who were the people that were in that land before? So I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to end on this. I said thing, Brother Carlos said, end on this thought that there's a lot of things that have transpired that we get a chance to do it right and not just build ourselves up and saying, oh, I'm all that in a bag of chips and all the rest of it, and everybody else can kick rocks. Because part of the deal is if we keep talking about, and that's why I said it gets back to not a religion. I'm not getting into religion. I'm talking about from a spiritual aspect that it is necessary for us to thrive in order for us to continue. And I don't mean us, I mean our children, because our children, they are us. In order for them to be able to build, we have to come together in some form of reconciliation. That's where it starts, because everybody wants to be right. Everybody wants, and that's the deal. And I'm seeing that in these YouTube battles. Everybody wants to be right. And sometimes if you are right, it could have been the way that it was displayed to say, you know what? I was wrong for the way I presented that. I was wrong for the way I did that. Now we have to do that. And that's where it starts, even within our own families. We have to do that. But I know when the sides were drawn, that because of the conflict that we had with the Chickasaw, and the Natchez decided they want to decide with the Chickasaw, now y'all became our mortal enemies. So then you'll see the battles between the British and the French, that they were not sending bodies. You think about it again, the land that's known as Great Britain today, we know it's several groups of people coming together. But those little islands couldn't produce these mass group of people that were ruling where the sun never sets on the British Empire. Same thing with the Spaniards. Remember, because initially it was the Spaniards. The sun never set on the Spanish Empire. How could you have these physical bodies all over the globe controlling everything? It is not physically possible. But if they're using proxies to fight each other, then when you realize the Choctaw and the Chickasaw were the same people to fight each other, like I said, all of the Muskogee Nation, that's why they call it a nation, meaning you are all come from the same blood, the same root, the Mississippi Maya. That cannot be denied. You can't. So we're going to continue on the next time with the Natchez people and how to get back. And I'm going to show you the words, the writings of those when they came, and the Aztecs said because again, when someone comes to an area and they say, oh, you're here, so did your people or did you build this house? No, this house was built in whatever year. This house was built in 1948. Okay, well, automatically 1948, you can't be 74 years old, so you didn't build it. So who built it? And it's the same thing when they came across with the Aztecs, the Azteca. They said, we didn't build it. You may have to go talk to the Toltecs. So as you get into the Toltec, you still get into the Toltec, you still get into the Tutu, which gets back to my people. And they say, no, we didn't build it. We didn't build it. So let's find out who built it. So now we can get this we off of this and trying to be inclusive. And we would say, oh man, I'm the Aborigine, and that's fine. Again, Aborigine is a French word, which means, yes, you are the original people of that land, because they called the people that. They said when we got to this land as the French, as the Huguenots, because again, we talked about that a couple of years ago. The Huguenots are French and Germans. There's the Francs. So if they are the Germanic people and they come over here and say, oh, you were already here, so you are the original people of this land. That means absolutely nothing as far as the saying. They're just saying that the Aborigine means that you were here when the foreigners arrive, they call you Aborigine. Just like they do in Australia. They call the Aborigines because they say, okay, when we got to Australia, when we got to New Zealand, these are the people that were already here. But what did you call yourselves? So if you sit here, if people sit here and say, well, I'm Aboriginal, I'm the Aborigines. Okay. But then they call the Aborigines in Australia the same thing. So which is it? So when you start breaking down to what did you call yourself? What is your name? Hancock with Will Smith. He didn't know his name. So he said, when they said, put your Hancock here. What did he tell you? All I had was 2 tickets to Warlock's Frankenstein and a bubble gum, stick of bubble gum. Keep my breath fresh. But I don't know my name. And remember, his now new friend's wife / his ex-wife, still in that movie, did not tell him his name. She told him about all the wounds, how he got this wound, how he got that wound, how they attacked us. But if you notice, she never told him his name. He went on to do great things, but he did not know his name. So we start breaking down who is who and the role that we played in our own destruction, which is where it gets back to the book of Elias Boudinot when he's talking to the people. He said, the book that the white man has was once ours. And because we disobeyed the laws of the Great Spirit, we fail. Nobody on the outside did it. We did it. So when you go look at the United States of America, and I end on this note, it won't be some foreign land that destroys this country, great country. I said great, not good. This great country, it'll be us from within. And with that, take care of yourself and each other. I appreciate y'all listening in. Again, we're going to have to do a part 3, probably part 4 of these Natchez, because we're going to go all the way back to who these people are and these mound builders. Why they, like I said, again, they built these mounds with calendars. And we're going to start talking about, and everybody said, oh, it's spooky, the giants in the land, because every other ancient culture all talk about giants in the land. And folk keep saying figuratively. No, they literally were on this planet. So again, reconciliation, put it all together. With that,